The Mormon Trail and the Mormons Who Made It. Led by Brigham Young, the Mormons who traveled the Mormon Trail had a big impact on history. They expanded and built trails and helped others traveling west by ferrying them across the river in exchange for provisions. Having experienced the violation of their First Amendment rights, the Mormons traveled west to find a place they could worship in peace. Once the Mormons got to the Salt Lake Valley, they built thriving communities, helping to establish new territories in the West, which would later become part of Utah and other states. The Mormon pioneers were faithful and strong on a hard journey to find religious freedom. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was founded on April 6, 1830. With their prophet and leader, Joseph Smith, Jr., the Mormons lived in New York, then Kirtland, Ohio, then Missouri, and on to Nauvoo, Illinois. But they didn't just move around because they felt like it. They kept being persecuted and chased out of the communities they built just because of their religion. While some people were upset by the teachings of this new religion, others were concerned about the tight-knit communities the Mormons formed. After experiencing unlawful persecution, physical harm, and loss of property in each place they settled, leaders of the church appealed to their local government, state government, and even the President of the United States. Their pleas for assistance went unanswered. In Missouri, Governor Lilburn Boggs issued an order for the extermination of all Mormons. The Mormons fled to western Illinois, where they built Nauvoo out of the swamps there. But this didn't last. On June 27, 1844, Joseph Smith, Jr. was murdered along with his brother Hiram while being held in Liberty Jail on unfounded charges. The Mormons now had to be on the move again. The first group of pioneers began the trek on February 4, 1846, once again being forced to leave their homes and most of their belongings to make a long journey to a place where they hoped to live and worship in peace. They traveled through Iowa, Nebraska, Wyoming, and ended in Utah, where the Mormons built up Deseret. The trek was 1,300 miles long and took over a year to traverse. However, some of that time was taken up by the pioneers staying in certain places. Along the trail, pioneers might have been sick, injured, or mourning for a dead loved one, but most likely bored and tired of walking. However, they could also have fun, tell stories, and enjoy the nature. In the church history part of LDS.org it says, "But surely this was the most unusual group to make the journey, organized in companies, with captains, committees, and choirs. They sang, danced, and worshipped their way across half a continent, building bridges, planting crops, and erecting shelters, in an orchestrated effort to ensure a better passage for those who would inevitably follow." At the Chariton River crossing, Orson Pratt wrote, "The heavy rains had rendered the prairies impassable, and our several camps were very much separated from each other. We were compelled to remain as we were for some 2 or 3 weeks, during which time our animals were fed upon the limbs and bark of trees, for the grass had not yet started, and we were a number of miles from any inhabited country, and therefore it was very inconvenient to send for grain. The heavy rains and snows, together with frosty nights, rendered our situation very uncomfortable." At the Missouri River, the pioneers formed 2 main communities, Council Bluffs on the east and Winter Quarters on the west side. It was here that Captain James Allen from the U.S. Army rode to them and asked for 500 men to fight in the war against Mexico, even though the U.S. government had done nothing to help them or try to save them from the persecution that made them embark on their trek anyway. Yet their leader, Brigham Young, encouraged the men to step up to their patriotic duty. William Hyde describes the scene. "When this news came, I looked upon my family, and then upon my aged parents, and upon the situation of the camps in the midst of an uncultivated, wild Indian country, and my soul revolted. But when I came to learn the mind of the Lord, and on learning the offering had to be made, or the sequel was not yet opened between us and the government, and our beloved President came to call upon the saints to know who among all the people were ready to offer for the cause, I said, 'Here I am, take me.'" Lucy Meserve Smith wrote, "We moved down to Winter Quarters when my babe was 2 weeks old. There we lived in a cloth tent until December, and we moved into a log cabin 10 feet square with sod roof, chimney, and only the soft ground for a floor, and poor worn cattle beef and corn cracked on a hand mill for our food. Here I got scurvy, not having any vegetables to eat. I got so low I had to wean my baby, and he had to be fed on that coarse cracked cornbread when he was only 5 months old. The next July, my darling boy took sick on the 22nd. And on the 22nd, my only child died. I felt so overcome in my feelings. I was afraid I would lose my mind, as I had not fully recovered from my sickness the previous winter. Hundreds of miles later, they passed through Confluence Point. LDS.org notes, Orson Pratt designed the odometer or rotometer to fit Heber C. Kimball's wagon, and Appleton M. Harmon, an expert carpenter and mechanic, used a wooden feed box and some iron scraps to build the device. William Clayton said, "My brother Appleton Harmon is working at the machinery for the wagon to tell the distance we travel and expects to have it in operation tomorrow, which will save me the trouble of counting, as I have done during the last 4 days." Chimney Rock was a prominent landmark on their way to Scotts Bluff. Priscilla Merriman Evans recalls an incident with a Native American. Some Indians came to our camp, and my husband in a joking way told one of the Indians that he would trade me for a pony. He thought no more of it, but the Indian came with the pony, and it was no joke to him. There was no place to hide, and the captain was called to help settle it. Fort Laramie was a major trading post to get food and supplies before heading into the mountains. At Independence Rock, many cut their names into the formation. Wilford Woodruff notes, "We examined the many names and lists of names of the trappers, traders, travelers, and emigrants, which are painted upon these rocks. The pioneers had a bit of fun there. Samuel Harrison Bailey Smith tells us, the evening of our arrival, I went up to the top of the rock to hear the bands play and also to sing several hymns. At Fort Bridger, the Oregon and Mormon trails separated, the Oregon Trail heading northwest and the Mormon Trail heading straight west. Abner Blackburn wrote, Old Jim Bridger and his trappers gave us a hearty welcome to our company. He is the oldest trapper in the mountains and can tell some wonderful stories." LDS.org describes the Needles as a very prominent rock formation near the Utah-Wyoming border. It was near here that Brigham Young became ill with what was probably Rocky Mountain spotted tick fever during the advance push into the Salt Lake Valley. Echo Canyon, one of the last canyons before the arrival in Salt Lake, was 1,246 miles away from Nauvoo. Regarding the echo effect of the canyon, William Clayton wrote, "There was a very singular effect in this ravine. The rattling of wagons resembled carpenters hammering at board inside the highest rocks. The Mormons weren't the only ones who used this path through the canyon. Buffalo natural explorers and Native Americans used it to get around as well." When the Mormons finally arrived at the Salt Lake Valley, they were very grateful and joyous. As quoted on a plaque at the This Is the Place monument, Wilford Woodruff said, "When we came out of the canyon in full view of the valley, I turned the side of my carriage around, open to the west, and President Young arose from his bed and took a survey of the country. While gazing on the scene, he was enwrapped in vision for several minutes. When the vision had passed, he said, 'This is the right place, drive on.'" The first scouting party arrived on July 22, 1847. From then on, saints were coming into Utah by the thousands, and people were getting busy with planting food and building houses. In fact, over 3 million people lived in Utah as of 2016. Soon, an orderly city like the ones in Nauvoo and Kirtland was made in the Salt Lake Valley. Mormons were able to live and worship peacefully and freely for longer than ever before. The Mormons were happy about arriving in Utah because they were finally able to have freedom to live the way they wanted. They weren't discriminated against for their religion anymore, and didn't have to worry about persecution. And after suffering everywhere they went and journeying across an entire continent with only a few possessions and a mortality rate of 3.5 to 16.5%, they weren't having too much success. In spite of sending some of their strongest men to join an army that hadn't defended them, the Mormon pioneers were blessed to make it to and settle in the Salt Lake Valley peacefully. Back in the eastern USA, the Mormons suffered persecution for years as they tried to seek safety in several different places. Finally, they were forced to move an entire civilization across the country and into another just to gain freedom. They trekked across the continent because they strongly believed in and cared a lot about their new religion. Instead of giving up their beliefs, they gave up daily comforts to begin the search for freedom. These pioneers, by heading west, saved Mormonism as a religion, as well as their lives and the lives of their descendants. By settling in Utah, these pioneers inhabited and built a civilization in most of what is now Utah and parts of other states. Also, their trail made travel between the East and West faster and easier. More people could come and live in the West. I believe the Mormon pioneers were faithful and strong on a hard journey to find religious freedom. Here are my sources.